So mine would be, we can't expect Africa to carry the weight of the climate crisis after we carried the weight of the global northern countries' development. Lest it not being fair, just economically, it doesn't make sense. The fact that countries are still extracting from Africa financially, clearly they see the value in Africa. And from that value, we need this to be spread more equitably. And I'm speaking specifically to the loss and damage finance facility that we're currently calling for. Our leaders, and then now addressing our African leaders, we need to stop going to COP27 with begging bowls. We hold power and you need to lean into that power. Yes, we're going through the most in terms of how much damage the climate crisis is causing in terms of extreme events. But if there's going to be a solar, if people are going to continue to lean on solar and so forth, they need African minerals. As people talk about carbon credits and so forth, they're talking about doing that on African land. So we need to lean into our power. And when we go to COP27, know that we're not going there to beg. We're going there to deal with people who are on par with us. For as long as we choose not to exercise our power, we might as well not have any. For as long as we go to COP27 and act like we're less than the people we're on the platform with, we might as well be less, because we will not demand, and thus we will not get what we deserve when it comes to addressing climate action as a continent and on a globe. And then I'll close by saying that we're calling this an African COP, but can we really call this an African COP if the global north, and specifically Africa, is one of the regions that's lost the most? And Africa, as one of the countries, as one of the continents that has been damaged the most because of the climate crisis, does not get a loss and damage facility that will ensure that we at least are able to breathe through the loss and damage and continue to live on the world. It's not about saving Africa, it's about saving all of ourselves as a race. We're not asking for favors. We're saying that people should do favors for themselves, and we will help them to see a few more years. So yeah. So mine, I'm going to touch on three. Firstly, again, the loss and damage facility. We can't have the global north, or so-called developing countries, causing a flood in Botswana, and then I need to go pay for my house. We got washed away by the actions of people in another country. And then secondly, accessible finance. Even the finance that's available currently, that countries have committed to taking, that have pledged. One, they're not even meeting half the targets that they've pledged to, but also the little that is there is near impossible to access. I mean, you need to set up a whole new institution just to tap into this funding. So the funding that is available needs to be accessible, even if not for the individual, just for African countries. If we need to set up an institution over 3 years just to tap into this facility or this so-called available funding, are we not better off even just like empower, like supporting entrepreneurs and then just getting the taxes from there instead of now putting money into it? It doesn't make sense. And then on the using, let's say, child labor for certain minerals, mine is a bit more, yours is more realistic. Mine is a bit more long-term, but a thing of these countries that are using these minerals from here should come and manufacture here, because by putting that distance between themselves and the resources, where they're getting the resources, they're then able to say, we don't know where our cobalt has come from. We don't know where our cobalt comes from. We don't know who's digging it up. We just know that we bought it from the nice guy at the corner, and he said that it had been dug up by somebody, and so forth and forth, and we believed him. So instead of always just extracting money from Africa by selling us products and then extracting the minerals and then coming and extracting more money by making us just consumers, like Sojud was saying earlier, where they're not adding actual value to the communities, we need to demand that some of these manufacturing happens here, so that the value add happens here, so that the economies that are growing are African economies, so that the people who are having their livelihoods sustained by the minerals from that country are the people of that country. And then my last one is also on fossil fuels. Right now, we're being told to keep our fossil fuels in the ground across Africa, which we all, I would say, agree on because of just the human rights violations against it, the health impacts that come out with that, and just the emissions and so forth. But then with keeping those emissions in the ground, we're being told we're being told to leave money that could sustain livelihoods, that could grow our economies in the ground. If we're going to keep fine, sorry, it's really hot here. If we're going to keep these minerals in the ground, if we're going to leave all this money underground, someone needs to pay for it. We can't be told that you can't touch you can't touch your fossil fuels or your money in the ground because we say so. Until we need it, then you can. We saw this with Europe. No fossil fuels, and then Europe has an energy crisis. Now all of a sudden we can do fossil fuels. So we need to understand that we're working with people who are not dealing with us in good faith. If we're being told to leave our coal in the ground, we need to be like, if you can make money off my coal, I can make money off my coal in the ground. So we also need to appreciate the landscape of the politics that we're playing and play the politics so that we're better for it as a continent, as a people, and our livelihoods can be sustained. The funny thing is when we talk about the issue of money flowing out of Africa, we always want to talk about corruption and not the illicit outflow of money. That's actually the real number that counts. But with that, it's a thing of, if let's say Apple, for example, chooses to open, let's not use any names. If company A chooses to open a manufacturing plant in, do you know what? If they're going to say they want to play it safe, they open it in a country in Africa that's somewhat politically stable. That way, even where they're getting their minerals, they're not that far from. Therefore, they can be held accountable for what's happening within their production line. And companies will bend over backwards to make sure that their name is clean, which is why when they think they can't keep their name clean, they'll just say, we'll have nothing to do with that. If they're going to build a company here, it forces them to make sure that they go to the ground and make sure that they're in control of the full production line of the value chain. And that way they can take accountability for all these steps. When you're talking about corruption, a lot of them are corrupt anyway, but they go to when you go to certain countries and you're doing business there, you can appeal to the public, you can appeal to different bodies that can help you maintain cleanliness if that's what you need, if there's a certain value that you're bringing to these communities. So on the corruption thing, there are a lot of countries, there are a lot of companies doing businesses in what would be termed as the most corrupt countries in the world. But then it's a thing of now that might force us to actually be accountable to the people of the country and not only our shareholders. Now we won't do business there. So it's just a thing of, is there willingness? And then if there's willingness, there will be a way that they'll find to do business, seeing as they're already doing business over there. Now they're just doing accountable business.